Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, I'm at a spot here where I have a question that's a confluence of some things I deal with my work life and some conversations that we had, and I want to just try to see if we can work it out. So, one of the things that I do in my consultancy firm is I basically transform businesses so that they will be able to work without the business owner. Said another way, I teach the business to grow up and be able to leave the house and not have the business owner involved in it every second of every day. And one of the things that I see a lot is, and again, I'm guilty of this as being a founder myself, is it's my baby. I don't trust anyone with it. The same analogies that we have with our children. You know, it's mine. I trust it. If no one else does it, it's not going to work. It's mine. I'm the only person I trust with my baby. And I think about a conversation we had when we were talking about who actually made Joey, who actually made my son. And you said something very interesting, I thought, during that, which really changed the way I thought about it, was he's really God's. At the end of the day, he'll be returning back to God. So I bring this up knowing that a business, while making a product or a service or whatever, still is a collection of people and ultimately still is a set of relationships. And I regularly walk into this issue of, it's my baby. I don't want anyone to touch it. I don't trust anyone else to do it, which from a business standpoint holds the business back and kind of is a death nail. My question is how should I better address this problem? Asking a direct how to deal with someone who is being controlling and not trusting of what they deem incredibly valuable to them because they've seen the ups and the downs and flat out they're invested in it emotionally, economically, and all the rest. So what is the best way to handle with someone like that, knowing that there are 5 million other applications that go just beyond talking to a business owner about their business?
And I might need a little bit of clarification
Sure.
on what you're asking. So, is it a problem that they're invested in their business? I guess I'm not following.
The problem is, and maybe I'll give another analogy to show it, is that they are so invested in their situation. We'll call it we'll call it a business, a belief system, whatever. That even if it's not being done the correct way, and if there were a better way, there's no way that I would ever trust someone to change it or modify it or even run it the exact same way it is now because I don't trust them to do what I am. So this could be a parent who's not willing to let their kid out of their sight. This could be a business owner, as I mentioned before. This could be someone who's just flat out not willing to listen to another idea because I'm so invested in the Green Bay Packers, I won't hear anything about another team, let alone evidence that someone else is better. Essentially, the key point of being so invested, so into something that I'm not willing to trust, listen to other ideas, let alone implementing or accepting them into my life.
Okay. Yeah, there's a reason that a person is in that situation of having, obviously you're trying to describe the scenario by using a sort of extreme expression of it, but I think it's something that we can all identify with to one degree or another, as you said, with whether it's with your own son or your own business. You know that you can do it well, and you don't trust that other people can do it well or that their ideas will be the best. And even though you may know your own ideas are a little inadequate here or there, or that you have things to learn in some area, you'd still rather your own mistakes than somebody else's ideas and potentially mistakes. And so I think some of that is natural in the regard to our fallen nature, that we don't trust And then there could be more extreme variants of it that people really have a death grip on something and really won't let anybody else into that space. Again, we don't have that unless we have a reason for it. And that's going to be probably an experience of betrayal or disappointment. Some of us might have a little bit more natural orientation to responsibility, or even we might say extra or a hyper responsibility, that we invest so much of ourselves in something and we take things so seriously and do carry through, but also may block others out because we're so determined to not let the ball be dropped that we won't even hand the ball off to begin with. And that's that can provide a real limitation. I like the African parable, I guess, or expression that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And the fact is that if we don't team up with others, then it will really limit how far we can go. And so if the thing that I love or what I want is great enough, then I have to let others in. To think of the human analogy, what you said about your son, if you don't let anybody have an influence on your son, it could get a little bit scary because wonderful as you are, Joe, you have your own limitations and you don't have everything that he needs. He needs other people in his life. He certainly needs his mother, for one example, but he even needs people beyond his father and his mother. He needs to be able to interact with others. He needs to grow through even through mistakes and difficulties, and he needs to learn for himself, although we try to stack the deck as best as possible to make those learning experiences as fruitful and undamaging as possible. But he has to learn for himself how to navigate different situations in life and different relationships. He has to receive gifts from others that you don't have to offer him. And that's going to be necessary for him to grow into the fullness of his own humanity that God made for him. So that's one obvious expression, but even in terms of a business or some other personal project, those things are going to be missing something if the only input they have is from me or from you, and so learning to broaden that is really necessary for the value, for the goodness of the thing that we're valuing, that we appreciate enough to take responsibility for it. So I guess I would say if this is something that you're struggling with, I would start by asking, why are you struggling? When have you been let down? Where are the wounds of betrayal? When have people dropped the ball? When have you experienced that sharing something has not worked out well? Because those are going to be important places to look at, and then to bring those experiences into conversation with somebody that you do trust, and to talk through some of those experiences of woundedness is going to help to a healing process, certainly bringing that into prayer. And then, if that's, if we need a little motivation, I would say inviting others into it that we do trust a little bit more, and seeing what happens when we take our hands off the wheel a bit on some of these different projects or people that we're invested in, and take a meaningful risk, not a imprudent risk, not a rash decision, but a meaningful risk to let someone else be involved with it, and see what happens when I take somebody else's idea in and try it out, and see the benefit of that in a real life situation. I think both of those things could be helpful in handling that control struggle we might have.
Yeah, that's such an amazing answer there. It's amazing how so many problems that seem extraordinary or just incredibly difficult mountains to climb come back to some of the most basic human things that you just outlined right there. A sense of being let down, a sense of not getting what I wanted, or all that, and ultimately that most of them boil back to hurt or fear. And it's amazing that how many obstacles that happens with, and we allow them to compound. I think that this is part of the intellectual misunderstanding I just don't get a lot of times with people, is that, like, if you know it's not working and you know it's just not the right way to go about it, why do you keep doing it over and over and over again? And I get that it's a habit and it's part of your daily life, but why don't you do something about it to change it? Whether that be having built-in systems where, there's some people who won't let their kid get on the bus. They have to drive their kid to school every single day, even though they had to change their work schedule to be able to make sure that they could drive the extra 40 minutes to take their kid to school, and then get to work because of that extra detour. I just don't understand, when you have things that are hurting you, why you'd continue doing them. It's mind-boggling to me.
Well, if I can offer, kind
Yes,
of
please.
piggybacking off of what you said there, when there are things that are hurting us, the risk is that it'll be worse if I move away from it. Even if I realize what I'm doing now is not the best, I'm doing it because I'm afraid if I did something different, it would be worse. And so,
Okay.
and when people have real experience of that, I think of a person who, gosh, you can have such strong experiences of this. A person who was hurt or witnessed a sibling being hurt by a mother-in-law, no, a stepmother, sorry.
Mhm.
And then, and I'm talking about really abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, and then bringing that to the dad. The dad invalidated the feelings, the experience, and supported the stepmother.
Mm.
And then I learned the lesson. I can't trust even the person who ought to be most trustworthy. If I can't deal with it myself, no one will help me. And so then I get really good at, and especially for somebody who's a little bit more gifted and is able to deal with a lot of things reasonably well on their own, they learn to deal with it on their own. And that becomes, it does become habitual. It kind of gets embedded in our nervous system, we might say, that my spontaneous response to certain kinds of stress or challenge is to double down and try harder because I can't depend on anyone else. And when we trace that back, we find, that is tied in with some of those initial experiences of being undefended in an experience of abuse. So that's, again, it's a little bit extreme. That's not going to be
Mhm.
everybody's experience, but it gives an insight into how that forms in us. And I think maybe with a little greater compassion for where those things might be lodged in our own hearts. And so even when we're doing something that we know is not optimal, maybe it would be better if other people were involved. And yet I find such tremendous resistance in myself to getting other people involved. Well, there's probably something there to explore and maybe a place of healing.
And you mentioned in the past some of the best ways to explore, to get deeper into those answers, is quietly, gently, nurturing way. Allow yourself to go into your mind and kind of see what happened. And your mind might come up with an entire Google results worth of different memories, some of which are want to be seen before others because the other ones are scary and bad. And one of the things that I have found and suggest that other people do is, you know, regularly and habitually, once a week or whatever, set time to let your mind go into that Google list. Even if you're starting with the top and easy ones, to just think about events in your past that didn't go the way you wanted them to. Maybe they, for whatever reason, and just witness the relationship that happened between person A and person B. Try to take as much of your own feelings at the time out of it, knowing that we're visiting this now through adult eyes rather than our younger eyes at the time. And just kind of Was a person A and person B correct given what their relationship should be? Not what it is, but what it should be. And then I invite people to sit in it, not necessarily try to immediately solve the problem, but just to sit in that situation in your mind's eye and witness it without casting judgment, anger, blame, whatever, but just sit in it. And I invite people to do that. And then the next day I invite them to go back and revisit it, to then go, well, what could we do different now? Again, going through that same process of gently visiting it and going through it. And what I found that when I talk to people who do both of them, say you do the one on Tuesday and the other one on Wednesday, where you sit in it on Tuesday and then on Wednesday you think about what I could have done about it, is that the next time they go back and they do that Google search result for things that were in their past, it's a little bit smaller. It becomes a couple less entries and a couple less entries. And the remarkable thing is that if they would have been doing this earlier, Google would have been finding new entries for them daily. And that has stopped. So using the example of Google finding things in your mind, and it doesn't mean that your brain is less good at identifying things that you didn't like from the past. But what I have found has happened is people start changing and start becoming better at relating to each other and opening things up, and their relationships become better. And these issues of fear and trust can erode with perpetual answers. So that answer came from talking to you over 7 years, by the way, of figuring out how to articulate that. But that being said, am I conflating two different things, or is that basically how we should be working with ourselves?
No, it's really beautiful to hear you say those things, Joe, and tells me that not only did you hear that from me, but that you've tried that, because what you described is connected to experience. And I would just add to that, some experiences are hard to face, hard to hold, hard to feel on our own. And so one of the ways that we do that is with a trusted friend who can help to hold some of those more intense emotions, more intense experiences. We may need to process that together with someone, of course, a counselor or a spiritual director who's trained in that is obviously a good choice. And there may also be friends who know how to just enter into experiences like you were describing and be with us as we feel some more intense emotions. And the emotional regulation provided by our grounded friend can help us to enter into more difficult memories. But what you described is beautifully said, that when we enter into those things, give ourselves space to feel them. And it's amazing. It's not a matter even necessarily of having insight or figuring something out. It really is a matter of entering into it and facing it, as you said, with our sort of adult perspective, and having compassion on the child part of us, even that was hurt in those experiences, and the child part of us that still reacts against those experiences. The grasping at control, or the stubbornness that keeps other people out, or those kinds of things are often young parts of us reacting against those difficult experiences, those painful memories. And so we can learn to have compassion on ourselves that we have those reactions, but to enter into the experience, to bring them into relationship with another person and into relationship with ourselves and the Lord is a way of a path of healing.
And yes, it makes me think of another thing that you've told us earlier, is that, really at the end of the day, trauma is just pain that you had by yourself. And even in this practice that we just outlined here of quietly entering your mind's eye, being gentle and nurturing, yes, technically it's an older version of yourself compared to a younger version of yourself. But in a way, it's making the situation less alone. And not saying it's going to solve the trauma instantly in one shot, but it does create a step down that road. And I know there's so many examples that you have given. One of the best, most compelling ones I remember is when we were talking about when Jesus said, don't be lukewarm. It's better to be all in on the wrong answer than to be non-moving at all. Just taking that one step in this particular direction really is powerful and meaningful. And it's what we would invite you guys to do over the course of this week. And Father, if you can give a final thought as we conclude this episode.
Yeah, well, you said things very well, Joe, and I just would reiterate the importance of being gentle with ourselves, especially in these more tender and sensitive areas of our hearts. But just to start with, looking at places in my life that are not working. Where are some places that are not working well, and what's going on underneath that? That's a good starting point towards a path for healing. And you can be sure that, just as you mentioned, God has a vested interest in your son, and he also has a vested interest in you. And so he wants to help work this out in a way that will that we can grow towards greater wholeness, healing.
Absolutely. And in today's episode, we obviously talked about ways that we can help us by looking at our own past. In the next episode, I'm going to bring up an idea with Father about how we can help ourselves in the future. So we thank everyone for listening to us here today. If you haven't already, please click share and review, and we will be with you again next week.